How will you go about in your capacity as Mayor to repair those soured relationships the factions wrought on the last term, given that 5 of the current group, including yourself, were re-elected?
Well, look, the first thing I'd like to say is that we've got a newly elected council. The majority of councillors are new councils, so certainly there's been, with those councillors, there's no history of relationships. The task that we've got now is, my vision is that if everybody is fully engaged and believes that they're being informed and believes that they've got a role to undertake, that you won't get any divisions. You know, people will understand. Do you think that's
where the issue was with the last term, or was it more personality based?
I really don't know. I'm tending not to try and analyse what's happened in the past, but draw a line under council. We've just had an election and say this is my vision for going forward. My next task, though, of course, then is to engage councillors in making sure that that's how they want it to happen. I would see very, very regular briefings between myself and councillors to just impart the knowledge that the Mayor gets on a regular basis, because at the end of the day it will be my job to go off to things like country mayors meetings and to attend more conferences than the other councillors get to attend. From that I'll garner information, I'll have greater contact with the staff than most of the councillors would have. It will be my job to make sure that they're getting as much of that information as possible, but without overburdening them with superfluous information.
Do you think that the city's reputation was somewhat damaged by the last term, whether it was perception or reality of these factions?
Oh, look, certainly there was a perception of factions. We've had discussions about whether they were indeed there or not. There was certainly the perception, and certainly everybody that speaks to me says, Rod, I want you to ensure that there's a different relationship between councillors than there was either actually or perceived in the last council. That's my role. I'm going to do the best I can to broker that.
Do you consider that may have damaged the reputation?
Well, certainly the perception has damaged the reputation. I've got a view that wasn't necessarily the case, and we've got to be very careful. I want to encourage debate. I expect people to have different ideas. I expect people to have different ideas from what I have. What I want, though, is that the final decision is accepted and at least understood, even if that wasn't your particular wish. And if we achieve that, people understand why the decision was made that way by the majority of councillors, then councillors, I'm sure, as a whole will support the decisions that are made, even if they debated against it.
You were one to vote for a motion of no confidence in the Mayor and Deputy Mayor earlier this year due to questions over their leadership. You're now in charge. How are you going to do things differently?
Look, I'm going to try and make sure that I react appropriately to the issues as they come up. That was particularly about an issue of support in the case of, I guess, what is described as cyberbullying. It was really an indication that at that time I certainly would have liked to have seen better support from the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor. I don't want to revisit those issues. What I will promise is that, to the best of my ability, if I recognise that a councillor is needing support through an issue such as that it is given in any way that it can.
You've talked about being a more inclusive mayor and sort of fostering that collaboration. Specifically, how do you go about doing that?
Well, I'm still trying to come to grips with specifically how you do go about it, but look, I think one of the important aspects of it will be, firstly, to share the load, to make sure that councillors have an opportunity to get before the media, for example, to get before the public in particular. So giving almost a portfolio role, but what that is, I'm not sure how that would come about. If we stick with the current committee structure, where we have 5 committees, you know, I see the chair of each of those committees certainly being the spokesperson for the role of that committee. How the the other councillors that aren't the chairs of those committees are engaged, I still need to have those discussions. And I also see it as not just Rod Kendall's decision on how we'd structure it. I envisage very regular briefings of councillors in a semi-formal manner. I think it's pretty dangerous to have any meeting that hasn't got some sort of an agenda, but not with strict meeting protocol, but that would allow people to express ideas, allow them to be informed of what's currently going on as issues within the community, and to get some feedback outside of the formal meeting process. If I can achieve that, I think we'll just, it'll build a team spirit.
Do you subscribe to the view that the Local Government Act 1993 relegated councillors to figureheads?
No, I don't totally agree with that. I know it absolutely relegated councillors, if you want to use that term, to the role of the strategic overview of council and making the strategic decisions.
A bit like the boardroom scenario that you talked about.
Well, look, it is a bit like a boardroom scenario, and I'm sure that was what was in the mind of the department to some extent. It's a model that works well in business, but council isn't business. We have a social responsibility as well. I think if there's an understanding between the elected body and certainly the senior management that the roles can have fuzzy edges. If we can achieve that sort of fuzzy edge, it's very important that me as an elected person know, and that my fellow elected councillors don't get involved in the role of trying to actually build what it is that we've decided we're doing. That is an operational role. But there is always where the two roles sort of join, the boundary I think is normally best if it has a sort of a fuzzy edge to it.
Okay. And you've said in the past that the mayor's term should be 2 years. Do you see yourself as a long-term mayor?
I don't see myself as a mayor in the next term of Parliament, the next term of council at this stage. I would certainly like
and
at
by
least...
next term you mean in 4 years?
Yeah, in 4 years' time. I see myself as... I would like at least 2 years. That's up to my fellow councillors. It'll largely be up to the job that I'm seen to be doing in the next 12 months. So the one thing about an annual mayoral election is that to some extent it is a review on your performance, to some extent. If the majority of councillors remain happy with the direction you're going, then you would expect that you've got a fair chance of being re-elected as mayor.
But it does open up that door for the politicking. And
of course it does. Of course it does. But it's we can't deny though that the politicking is part of the democracy, and that's part of the strength of what we do. It's really a matter of I've now got the opportunity to show what I can provide in leadership. It's up to me to provide it, quite frankly, and if I don't provide it, then I won't deserve to be re-elected. So my job now is to make sure I do what I said I'm going to do.